I was shaking so bad. I mean, my knees were knocking my teeth, and I was froze.
A young deer, its eyes wide with terror and its body drenched in sweat, crashes through the underbrush. It doesn't run from the hunter in the deer stand, it runs to him, pressing itself against the wooden legs as if begging for protection. The hunter, Mike Wooley, raises his rifle expecting to see a prize buck hot on its trail. But what he sees instead is no buck. It's a massive dark-haired figure and its eyes are fixed right on him.
He's standing behind a tree looking at me about 15 yards. And I'm looking at him, and it was terrible.
The deer wasn't the prey, Mike was, and the hunt had just begun. Before the scream. It's funny when you think about it, how a day can start so normal and end so different. For Mike Wooley, that day in December of 1981 began like any other hunting trip. The air in the Louisiana woods was cold, so cold it felt like tiny needles on his skin. A crisp, clear winter morning. The kind of quiet that feels heavy like a blanket laid over the whole world. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of a leaf sounded like a gunshot in the vast stillness. This wasn't just any forest. The deep woods near Keechee, Louisiana are a world of their own. A place where sunlight struggles to pierce the thick canopy. We're talking about a sprawling wilderness that stretches for thousands of acres, a tangled maze of ancient pines and dense undergrowth. Mike was perched in his deer stand, a small platform about 10 feet off the ground. It wasn't much, just a simple wooden structure, but it gave him a clear view of the surrounding area. He was a good mile and a half from the nearest paved road, deep in the creature's territory. Believe it or not, some of these southern swamps are less explored than parts of the Amazon rainforest. They hold secrets. That morning, the secret was watching him. For a full 30 minutes, nothing moved. The world was frozen. Mike was a patient man, a seasoned hunter who knew the rhythms of the forest. He knew that stillness often came before the action, but the silence on this day was different. It was watchful. It was waiting. An unnerving feeling began to creep up his spine, the kind of primitive instinct that tells you when you're no longer alone. He scanned the trees, his eyes tracing the dark lines of the bark against the pale winter sky, searching for the flick of an ear or the flash of a white tail. But there was nothing. Only the woods, the cold and the oppressive, heavy silence. He had no idea that in just a few moments, that silence would be shattered by pure primal terror. What broke the silence was not a sound, but a desperate sight. The panic-stricken doe. Out of nowhere, the stillness was broken. It wasn't a buck, though. It was a young doe, and something was terribly wrong. She wasn't moving with the usual grace of her kind. No, she was running with a frantic, blind panic that hunters rarely ever witness. She burst from the dense underbrush like an explosion of fur and fear. Her sides were heaving, and her coat, even in the cold air, was dark and slick with sweat. Think about that for a second. A deer, an animal built for cold weather, was sweating so much you could see it. The level of stress to cause that is astronomical, something reserved for an immediate and deadly threat. But here's the part that makes no sense, the detail that flips this whole story on its head. The doe wasn't running away from Mike. She didn't even seem to notice him perched 10 feet above the ground. Instead, she ran directly towards his deer stand. It's a scientific fact that a prey animal's first instinct is to put distance between itself and any perceived threat, especially a human one. Yet this deer did the exact opposite. She crashed against the base of the stand, her body trembling violently. She pressed herself hard against the rough wood as if trying to hide behind it, as if seeking protection from the hunter himself. It was a completely unnatural act. A deer seeking refuge with its number one predator? It was unthinkable. Mike was baffled. His hunter's brain was trying to process the scene to make it fit into the rules of nature he knew so well. He figured a huge buck, maybe the trophy of a lifetime, must be chasing her, running her ragged. He gripped his rifle, his heart beginning to pound with anticipation, and scanned the woods from which she had come. He was ready for a buck. He was not ready for what came instead. Not a man in a suit. And then he saw it. About 20 yards to his left, partially hidden by the thick trunk of an old pine tree, stood a figure. This was no buck. The first thing that hit Mike was the sheer size of it. The thing was massive, standing somewhere between 7 and 8 feet tall. Its shoulders were incredibly broad, wider than any man he had ever seen, and covered in long, dark hair. Its arms were long, hanging down almost to its knees, reminding him of a gorilla. But it wasn't a gorilla. It wasn't a bear either. It was standing upright, perfectly still, like a dark statue planted in the forest floor, and it was staring right at him. Now get this. The human brain has a funny way of trying to make sense of the impossible. Mike's first thought wasn't monster. His first thought was, it's a prank. He figured it had to be one of his buddies in a gorilla costume trying to spook him. Annoyed but not yet scared, he called out, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Hey, take the head off and get out of here." The figure didn't move. It didn't flinch. It just stood there. That's when a cold knot of dread began to form in Mike's stomach. He slowly raised his rifle, not to shoot, but to see. He peered through the scope. The magnification that was meant to find deer brought something far more terrifying into focus. He could see puffs of condensed air leaving its nose. He saw its face, a face that was almost human. The skin was a light brown color, leathery and weathered. He saw deep-set eyes, a prominent brow ridge, and a jawline. He saw its mouth slightly open, revealing flat, square teeth that looked eerily like a person's. This was no costume. The level of detail was too perfect, too real. He was looking at a living, breathing impossibility. No longer the predator. Just as the reality of the situation was crashing down on him, a sound ripped through the forest that froze the blood in his veins. It came from deep within the woods, a deep, guttural roar that was filled with power and aggression. It was the kind of sound that vibrates in your chest, a primal noise that bypasses your ears and hits you right in the soul. It wasn't an animal he recognized. Then, from another direction, about 100 yards away, came a sharp, piercing whistle. It was loud and clear, a signal, and the creature in front of him answered. It let out its own whistle, a perfect mimic of the first, and then its head snapped back to look directly at Mike. Its eyes locked with his, and in that one horrifying moment, everything became crystal clear. The deer wasn't the target, the stand wasn't a hiding place, it was a trap. He was the bait. There were two of them. They were communicating, they were coordinating. It's one thing to see a monster, it's another thing entirely to realize it's intelligent. The average person can process about 40 bits of information per second, but in moments of extreme fear, the brain can feel like it's processing 1,000. Mike's mind was racing. He was 1.5 miles from his truck. He was 10 feet up in a wooden box with no escape. The creatures knew exactly where he was. They had planned this. The one in front of him was the spotter holding his attention, while the other one was likely circling around, cutting off his escape. He was no longer the hunter. He was the prey, cornered and exposed. His deer stand had just become his cage. Crashing through the pines. There was no time for a plan. There was only instinct. The deer stand, his place of safety just minutes before, now felt like a coffin. He knew if he stayed, he was finished. In one fluid motion driven by pure adrenaline, Mike jumped. He landed hard on the cold ground, the 10-foot drop jarring his bones, but he didn't feel it. He was already running. He sprinted west, back toward the old logging road where he'd parked his truck. The only thought in his mind was the truck, the blessed safety of steel and glass. Behind him, the woods erupted. He could hear heavy footsteps thundering behind him, easily keeping pace. It wasn't the sound of a man running, it was heavier, more powerful. It was the sound of something tearing through the forest. He heard the crash of branches and the snapping of small trees as the creature gave chase. The sheer force was terrifying. It wasn't going around obstacles, it was going through them. The human body can do incredible things when flooded with adrenaline, allowing people to lift cars off loved ones. Mike was running faster than he ever had in his life, his lungs burning, his legs pumping like pistons. He risked a single glance over his shoulder. What he saw would be burned into his memory forever. The 7 to 8 foot tall, black-haired creature was running upright, but with the gait and incredible speed of a charging gorilla. It was a terrifying combination of man and beast, a living locomotive of muscle and fury, and it was gaining on him. The truck was in sight now, a distant glint of metal that represented his only chance of survival. The hunt was over, but the haunting had just begun. A test of character. When you stare into the abyss, you can't just walk away and forget what you saw. You start trying to make sense of it, and that's where things get really wild. Was this just a territorial dispute with an unknown ape? Or was it something more? Let's consider the deer. Its bizarre, unnatural behavior could be a key. Some researchers believe these creatures can emit infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing. Get this, infrasound has been proven to cause feelings of intense anxiety, dread, and even hallucinations in humans. Tigers use it to momentarily paralyze their prey with fear. What if that initial roar wasn't a challenge, but a weapon? What if they hit that doe with a blast of infrasound, driving it mad with terror and herding it directly toward Mike's stand to flush him out? It changes the game from a simple hunt to sophisticated psychological warfare. Then you have to ask yourself, what was their goal? If they wanted to harm him, they had every opportunity. An 800-pound creature moving with that speed and power could have overtaken him in seconds, but they didn't. This has led to an even stranger theory, that they weren't hunting him for food, but testing him. Think about it. Over 1,600 people go missing in U.S. national parks every single year under mysterious circumstances. What if these creatures are the gatekeepers of the deep wilderness? They see a man with a weapon, an intruder, and they decide to see what he's made of. They orchestrate a high-stress scenario, pushing him to the absolute limit just to see what he will do. Will he panic and shoot wildly, or will he show restraint? Mike's choice not to fire directly at the creature, to fire a warning shot instead, might have been the passing grade on a test he didn't even know he was taking. He proved he wasn't a mindless threat, and so they let him go. And that brings us to the wildest idea of all. Maybe these things aren't just animals. The way they appeared, coordinated with unseen signals, and then simply watched him leave, it feels less like the behavior of an ape and more like something otherworldly. Some theorists claim these beings are not from our dimension. They can step in and out of our reality, which is why they are so elusive, leaving behind nothing but giant footprints and terrified witnesses. They are the true masters of the forest, ancient and intelligent in ways we can't comprehend. The encounter wasn't a hunt or a test, it was a warning. A brief, terrifying glimpse behind the curtain to remind us that we are not the only ones here. That the world is far older, stranger, and more dangerous than we can possibly imagine. The real question isn't what they are, but why they revealed themselves. A moment's hesitation. He was almost there, just a few more feet. He knew he wouldn't make it to the truck door before the creature was on him. In a last, desperate gamble, he spun around, his boots skidding on the dirt road. He raised his rifle in one smooth, practiced motion. He didn't aim at the creature's chest or its head. In that split second, a thought flashed through his mind that taking its life would be wrong, an act he couldn't commit, even to save his own. Instead, he aimed at the trunk of a massive pine tree right next to it, about 7 feet up. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the quiet woods. The bullet slammed into the tree and bark exploded outwards, showering the creature's face with a spray of wood splinters. It was a get-back shot, a warning, a desperate plea. The creature didn't scream or roar, it just stopped. The surprise of the impact gave Mike the 1 second he needed. He didn't wait to see what it would do next. He turned, dove into the cab of his truck, and slammed the door shut. His hands, trembling, fumbled with the keys. He locked the doors and cranked the engine, which roared to life. He stomped on the gas pedal and the truck fishtailed on the dirt road before shooting forward. As he sped away, his eyes shot to the rearview mirror, and what he saw was almost as chilling as the chase itself. A second massive figure had stepped out onto the road. It was unmoving, a silent giant watching him. The first creature, the one that had chased him, walked up and stood beside it. Side by side, the two of them just stood there watching him drive away until the road turned and they disappeared from view. They didn't try to follow, they just let him go. The hunt was over, but the haunting had just begun. A new respect for the woods. Driving away, Mike's mind was a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. But as the miles passed and the truck ate up the dirt road, the raw, heart-pounding fear began to be replaced by something else, something heavier, a deep and profound sense of awe. He couldn't shake the image of the creature's face, a picture burned into his mind with perfect clarity by the rifle scope. It was the details that were truly haunting. The light brown, leathery skin, the distinct line of its jaw and the prominent brow, the flat, square teeth that were nothing like a predator's fangs. Believe it or not, the most human-like detail of all, the one that kept him awake for years, was the eyelashes. The creature had thick, dark eyelashes. It's such a small, insignificant thing, but it was a detail that made the creature feel less like a monster and more like something else. Something that completely blurred the lines between man and beast. How do you process that? How do you go back to your normal life after seeing a mythological beast that has eyelashes? The thing that truly haunted him, more than the chase or the bone-shaking roar, was that final silent moment on the road. The creature had him. It was faster, stronger, and he was completely at its mercy. The warning shot might have startled it, but anyone who has spent time in the wild knows it wouldn't have stopped a truly enraged animal. He came to believe, with every fiber of his being, that the creature made a conscious choice. It saw his warning shot not as a threat, but as the act of a man who didn't want to cause harm. And in response, it chose to stop. It chose to let him live. Think about that for a second. That level of intelligence, of awareness, is more frightening than any display of brute force. It implies reason, and if it can reason, then it can judge. Before that day, Mike Wooley didn't believe in Bigfoot. He thought it was just a myth, a campfire story told on the West Coast, thousands of miles away. That one encounter didn't just scare him, it shattered his reality. The wilderness was no longer just a place to hunt, a resource to be used. It was a place with its own masters, its own ancient rules. It was a sovereign territory, and he had been an intruder. His advice to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation is simple and born from hard-won experience. Don't engage. Don't make eye contact. Don't point a weapon. If you are given the chance to walk away, take it without hesitation. Because, as he says, it's a fight you cannot win. And he doesn't just mean a physical fight, it's a fight against something that owns the shadows, something that has been there for thousands of years watching us. The woods are deep and old, and some things are better left undisturbed. We are merely visitors in a kingdom we will never fully understand. So what do you think? Was this an act of mercy from an intelligent being, or just a lucky escape? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories.